All right, this truck is already looking a lot more aggressive by just changing out the wheels and tires, but we're gonna continue along with this build and we're gonna go ahead and install the rock sliders now. Now the rock sliders are gonna not only provide a nice step up into the vehicle, but they're gonna protect the underside by adding an Under Armour plating that's gonna completely replace the plastic panels underneath. So a lot more protection, a lot more stronger, integrated jacking points as well as the OEM jacking points. Let's go ahead and jump into that. All right, we're looking at one complete side of the kit right now, the three main components. We've got the Under Armour plate, we've got the tread plate, and we've got the main slider frame. And then additionally, we've got the hardware bag, which is gonna be the hardware for the entire kit, both sides. That hardware bag is going to be in one of the boxes with the slider frames. So right now, let's go ahead and actually jump into that hardware bag and take a closer look. All right, we're looking at our hardware kit here. So these smaller Allen head bolts, these are going to be for attaching our tread plate to the top of the slider. And what you'll do is you'll take one of these bolts and you'll take a washer and slip it onto the bolt. And then this is going to go down through the top of the tread plate. On the bottom side, we'll take a serrated nut here, and this is what's going to lock it all together. So that's going to be for our tread plate. Then we have our barrel nut clips and our 12mm bolts. These are going to be for attaching the Under Armour plating to the slider frame. And then finally, we have our TP55 bit for our body bolts and our T20 bit for removing our factory plastic panels. All right, now that we've seen what comes in the box, we're going to take a look at the tools we're going to need to complete this job. Starting off, we have the TP55 bit that's going to be included in the box. We pair this with a 7/16 socket, and perfect fit there. So that's going to be to remove our body bolts. And we have a couple options. We have an impact wrench if you don't have that. We have our 1EV breaker bar, and we have the torque wrench. We're going to be using that a bit later on in the install, but both of these are included in our DIY wheel and tire package install toolkit. So in addition to that, we're going to need 12, 13, 15, and 17mm sockets. We have a cordless drill here and a ratchet, and we have a 10mm and T20 Torx bit. We're going to use these tools here to remove the factory plastic panels underneath the Rivian. Additionally, we're going to use this flat blade screwdriver to help with popping the clips loose on those plastic panels. Finally, we have some Loctite and a ratchet and 12mm socket. We're going to use this on a couple of things. The Loctite is going to go on our body bolts before we put them back in, and it's going to go on the fasteners for the skid plate. So this is everything we'll need today, and now we're going to move over to the truck and get started with this install. All right, to make this a little bit easier before we hop underneath the truck, I'm going to go ahead and put it in off-road mode and just raise it up all the way so we have enough room underneath to work. Let's make sure it's in the highest setting. Okay, we're going to put the tread plate onto the slider frame now. Get the holes lined up. And I'm just going to start dropping in bolts. And I'm going to put a washer on the bolt beforehand. All right, now that all the bolts are started through the tread plate and the slider frame, I've got it carefully tilted up, and I'm going to hold the bolt on the top side with my finger, and I'm going to grab a nut, and we'll get it started on the bottom side here. Now we'll go through and put a nut on each one of these bolts. All right, I've got a 10mm wrench and a 4mm Allen wrench now, and we're just going to go ahead and snug these bolts up on the tread plates. These don't need to be crazy tight, but just get them nice and snug. All right, so we're just going to run down the line here and tighten all of these fasteners up. All right, with this tread plate attached now, this slider is prepped and ready. We can just leave it here, set it to the side. And now we're gonna jump over to the truck and we're gonna work on removing the plastic panels from the bottom. All right, so now that we're underneath the truck, we're gonna get these plastic panels removed. This is the front of the truck. We're gonna start with the front panel, and then we're gonna do the rear panel, and then we'll do the center. So I've got a T20 Torx on my drill here, and I'm gonna take off these 2 bolts. All right, now I'm gonna switch to my 10mm socket, and we have 2 10mm bolts to remove. One more at the rear. All right, so this is where our long flat blade screwdriver is gonna come in handy. We're gonna need to pry this panel loose of its little insert clips, and you might be able to do this by hand. Watch out for dirt falling on you. So now we have these metal clips in here, if you can see that. Some of these might pop loose by hand, like these just did. If not, you can get your flat head into there and pry it loose like that. All right, we got the first panel off. And if you can see this here, the front and rear panels overlap the center. That's why we need to remove the front and rear before we do the center. Okay, we're at the rear now. This is the rear panel. All we have to remove on this one is 1 10mm bolt right here. And same thing, we're gonna get our flat blade, and then a lot of these will have some 3M double-side tape running along this edge that you'll just need to get free. So we can get our screwdriver in there and start to work this loose. There we go. Now we just have our metal clips to release. All right, now we just have to work on the center. All right, on this center panel, there's no fasteners to remove, just some clips here along this edge and our metal clips along the front here. So you'll see these plastic tabs are sliding into the metal rail here, so we just have to release those. All right, we'll start working on the metal clips. All right, so now with the panels removed, you can see the underneath of the truck, and you can see these 2 bolt lines where we're gonna be working. So if you reference the written instructions, we have a red line and we have a yellow line. The red line is just gonna refer to all of these large TP55 body bolts going down the side of the truck here. And then the yellow line is gonna be further inboard from that. And there's gonna be a few 17mm bolts we need to remove there. And we're gonna show all of this to you right now. So basically, we have, if you count these from the front of the truck, this would be bolt number 1. So we got 1, 2, 3. These first 2 are gonna stay. We're gonna remove 3. We're gonna remove 4. We're going to partially remove 5. We can fully remove it and then thread it back in by hand a couple of turns. And what we're essentially going to start doing is we're going to lower a few of these bolts down, and that's going to be our base, which we slide the slider frame onto, and it's going to allow it to hang. And then we'll start threading in bolts and get it secured, but that's gonna make it easy for us to install it initially. So again, we're gonna remove 3, 4, partially remove 5. We're going to fully remove 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then on the yellow line, we're going to remove this 15 millimeter right here. So if you go 1, 2, and then you go all the way inboard, it's gonna be this 15 millimeter. Moving up, you're gonna see these triangular black plates here and here. There's gonna be 2 17 millimeters. We're gonna remove those. This body bolt will already be removed. We'll remove the black triangle piece and we'll set that aside. It will not be reused. We'll do the same thing here. Once we remove those, we're gonna take these 17s and we're gonna partially thread them back in, just like we did with number 5. So we're gonna do that here, here, and then finally, the last bolt we're gonna partially remove to hang is going to be the 13 millimeter right here. It's going to be the forward-most 13 millimeter on this rear section right here. So it's gonna be this. So if we recap all of the bolts that are gonna be left in the vehicle for purposes of hanging the slider, it's gonna be 1 15 millimeter right here. It's going to be 1 body bolt right here in position number 5. It's going to be both 17 millimeter bolts at both of these positions. And then finally, it's gonna be the 1 13 millimeter right here. And reference the written instructions, and all of this is gonna be listed in there, and you'll have a visual guide as well as this video to go along. But basically, we'll just start removing bolts now. And I will start with number 3. So 1, 2, 3. This is where we need our 7/16 socket and TP55. You can do this with an impact wrench or a long breaker bar. All right, continuing to work our way down the red line, we're gonna remove 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Looking at body bolt number 4, we're gonna go ahead and remove this as well. And make sure you hang on to these bolts because we're going to be reusing them to install the slider. And we're just gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on them before we do. But body bolt number 4, we're gonna remove. All right, now just set it to the side here. All right, we're at body bolt number 5 here. All right, and this one, remember, we need to thread back in by hand, just a couple of turns, and we're gonna leave this hanging. The slotted design of our rock slider is gonna allow us to slide this on when we install it. All right, body bolt number 6. This is the second black triangle. We're gonna fully remove this bolt. All right, number 7, fully remove. All right, we're at number 8. Number 9. And finally, number 10. All right, we're gonna work on the yellow line now. And since we're already at the back, we're just gonna start at the back here. So look at body bolt position number 9. We're gonna come in, we have the 13mm here. So go ahead, grab your 13mm socket, your 15 and your 17, because we're gonna need all three of those on this yellow line here. So let's remove the 13mm right here. And this one, again, we're gonna thread this back in by hand a couple of turns. All right, still on the yellow line here. We're moving up towards the front of the vehicle, but this is the rearmost black triangle. Go ahead and swap out your 13mm socket for a 17, and let's remove these two bolts. All right, we can also remove the black triangle at this time and discard. We don't need to use it anymore. Then we'll take the 17s we just removed and thread them in by hand a couple of turns. All right, the next thing you're gonna come to along the yellow line that we need to deal with is going to be the forwardmost black triangle. So again, same thing, 17mm right here. Remove this, thread our bolts back in, and then we've just got one more bolt along this line that we need to do. All right, last one, grab your 15mm socket. We're gonna find, we've got number 1, number 2 body bolt, go in from number 2, and we have this 15mm right here. Let's remove it. And then back in a couple of turns. All right, at this point we have all the bolts removed that need to be removed, and we have all the hanging bolts in place. So at this point we can grab the slider frame and we can hang it off all of these bolts, and then we'll just start reinstalling bolts. All right, last step before we install our slider frame, grab all your body bolts and your blue Loctite, and we're just gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on all these threads before we reinstall them. Also at this time, go ahead and grab your number 5 body bolt off the truck. Just don't forget to partially thread it back in before you grab your slider frame. So I'm gonna take a little bit of Loctite and concentrate on the first portion of the threads down near the bottom. And then as you spin this in, it's gonna distribute this along all the threads. All right, so I'm gonna grab one of these. I'm gonna thread it back into position number 5, just a couple of turns by hand, and then we can grab our slider frame. All right, so we have grabbed our slider frame now. We got Loctite on all the bolts. Don't forget to thread your number 5 bolt back in a couple of turns. But now you're either gonna need a friend, or if you don't have anyone that can help you, you can grab a floor jack and maybe some padding and put it underneath the slider, and that can help you lift it up. And once you get it up high enough, you can slide it in by yourself. But we've got an extra set of hands here today, so we're just gonna lift the slider up, and we're gonna try and line it up with all our bolts that are hanging and just slide it on. Perfect. All right, so at this point, the slider is just hanging on all of our bolts. We're safe, but be careful at this point not to bump it or anything, because it could slide off of these bolts and then fall. But we're gonna go ahead and start threading in bolts so that doesn't happen. And I'm gonna go ahead and take our TP55 bit, and I'm gonna tighten up number 5 a little bit so it will pick the whole unit up, and then we'll take the rest of our body bolts and just start putting those in by hand. Alright, that's good enough. You can see how it picked it up some. And go ahead and grab all your sockets. Once we get all the body bolts in, we're gonna need to tighten all of our bolts, and then we'll torque everything to spec. But for now, I'm gonna start right here at number 3 and just put body bolts back in by hand. All right, putting in number 4. We can jump down here to number 6. All right, and 7 and 8. All right, just past 8 here, we've got number 9. All right, last one at the end here, number 10. All right, now all the bolts are in place at this point, so we just need to go through and tighten everything up. I'm gonna start with all the body bolts and just work my way down. If you're using an impact at this point, just make sure you put it on a lower torque setting. Like I said, we're gonna come back and we're gonna use the torque wrench to tighten these to 80 foot-pounds. Our 17s are gonna get tightened to 45 foot-pounds, and then the 15 at the front and the 13 at the rear, those are gonna get tightened to 25 foot-pounds. But right now, I'm just gonna quickly snug all of these up, and then we'll come back with the torque wrench afterwards. All right, again, since we're down here at the rear now, I'm gonna go ahead and snug up the 13mm. Make sure to do this by hand. These don't need a whole lot of torque. All right, that's snug. We'll come back and check it with a torque wrench. All right, working our way back towards the front of the truck, we come to our two 17s in the rear. Again, we're gonna do all these yellow line bolts by hand. Just go ahead and snug them up. All right, again, moving towards the front, we come to our next set of 17s. Just gonna snug these up. All right, we're at our very last bolt here, all the way at the front, the 15mm. We'll just go ahead and make sure this is snugged up. All right, we're gonna set the torque wrench for 80 foot-pounds, and then we'll go through and tighten all the body bolts. All right, we've got our torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds. We got our TP55 bit. We're gonna run all the way down the red line here and make sure all of our body bolts are torqued to 80 foot-pounds. All right, body bolts are all torqued. We'll now move to the yellow line, and I've reset the torque wrench to a different setting. We got 25 foot-pounds here on our 15mm bolt at the front. All right, well, we have our torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds. We're gonna come all the way to the rear here and get this 13mm. All right, we've got our socket swapped out for a 17mm. We've got our torque wrench set to 45 foot-pounds, and now we're gonna tighten our 17mm bolts. We're towards the rear of the vehicle right now, and we're gonna work our way towards the front. All right, last two, same thing, 17mm, 45 foot-pounds. All right, now the slider frame is completely installed. We just have a few more steps to go. So right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna prep our Under Armour plating hardware, because installing the Under Armour plate is gonna be our next step. So you have your barrel nut clips and our 12mm bolts. These are gonna go together. We need to put Loctite on all of our 12mm bolts, and then once that's done, we'll go underneath the vehicle, install our barrel nut clips on the slider frame, and then we can grab our Under Armour plating and bolt it up. So just like we did with our body bolts, we'll put a little bit of blue Loctite, focusing on the beginning of the threads. All right, speaking of our barrel nut clips, we're back underneath the vehicle now. We're looking at the slider frame. We're at the very front. There's gonna be 8 of these oval holes underneath the slider frame, 8 on each side. So we're gonna take our barrel nut clips and we're gonna install them at all of these locations. And they're just gonna slip over like that. All right, we're working our way down. There's gonna be 4 of these tabs on the innermost edge of the slider frame. And then if you can see out here on the outer rail, there's also gonna be 4 of these oval holes. So 8 total, and we're just gonna slip these on. All right, back up front, I'm gonna work on this outer rail now. There's 4 locations for these oval holes where we need to install barrel nut clips. All right, at this point, we can grab our slider frame and we'll lift it up into position. Use our 12mm bolts to bolt it up in these locations. All right, getting down to our last steps here. We need to lift our Under Armour plating into position. This is another step where you may need a spare set of hands. But what we're gonna do is lift this up and we're gonna line up the holes in the plate with the barrel nut clips we just installed. And you'll want to have your 12mm bolts ready while you're doing this. You're gonna need 8 of them. So once you get the holes lined up, you can grab a bolt and thread it in by hand. And this is gonna help hold the plating up for you once you get some bolts started. All right, last step. We're gonna take a 12mm socket and a ratchet, and we're just gonna snug up these 12mm bolts. All right, that is gonna complete our rock slider install on this Rivian R1T today. This thing is nicely outfitted for adventure now with the new wheels and tires and these rock sliders. These are not only gonna double as a nice step up into the vehicle, but they're gonna protect the underside with their beefy construction and that nice Under Armour plating completely covering the bottom side of the truck. So if you have any questions about what we did on this install today, make sure to leave a comment down below. We'd be happy to help. If you want to check these out for yourself or any of the tools we used today, you can do that at evsportline.com. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified whenever we post new videos. We've got lots more EV videos coming very soon. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.